You think you're solid, real, fixed in space and time. But here's what physics actually says. You're not. The atoms that make up your body, they don't exist the way you think they do. They're not things. They're not even real, not until someone observes them. And this isn't philosophy, this isn't spirituality. This is Nobel Prize-winning physics that most scientists refuse to talk about openly because the implications, they're terrifying and liberating and everything. Let me tell you something. For decades, physicists have known a truth so uncomfortable, so reality-shattering that they've developed an unspoken agreement. Don't ask what it means. Just shut up and calculate. That's literally what they say. Shut up and calculate. But what if I told you that what they're avoiding, what they refuse to fully confront, is the answer to the question you've been asking your entire life? The question of whether you have power, real power, not motivational poster power, not positive thinking power, but power at the most fundamental level of reality itself. I'm talking about the Copenhagen Interpretation of quantum mechanics, the dominant framework that explains how the microscopic world works. And here's where it gets interesting. According to this interpretation, reality as you know it doesn't exist independently of observation. Your observation, your consciousness, your attention. Now, before you click away thinking this is some new age nonsense, let me be clear. Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, Max Born, these aren't spiritual gurus. They're the architects of modern physics, Nobel Prize winners, the people who gave us the atomic age. And they concluded something stunning, something most of them spent the rest of their lives trying not to think about too deeply. Ready to go deeper? Because what I'm about to share changed everything I thought I knew about reality and my place in it. Here's the foundation, the thing that breaks everything you thought you knew. In 1927, a group of physicists gathered in Copenhagen. They'd just discovered something impossible. When they observed tiny particles, electrons, photons, atoms, these particles behaved differently than when they weren't being observed. Not just differently, fundamentally differently. Pascual Jordan, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, put it like this: observations not only disturb what is to be measured, they produce it. Let that sink in for a moment. Observations don't just reveal reality, they produce it. Werner Heisenberg went even further. He said atoms are not things. They're potentialities or possibilities rather than things. Think about that. The fundamental building blocks of everything you see, touch, feel. They're not actually things in the way you understand things to be. They're tendencies, possibilities, probabilities. But here's the kicker, and this is where most people get it wrong. This isn't about technology. It's not that our instruments are too crude to see what's really there. The Copenhagen Interpretation says there is no really there until observation collapses the wave of possibility into a single actuality. Before you observe an electron, it exists in what's called a superposition state. It's not that it's in one place and you just don't know where, it's that it's in multiple places simultaneously, all at once. The electron is the wave of probability. That's its actual state. The moment you measure it, the wave function collapses, and suddenly, only then, the electron appears in one specific location. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but that's just electrons, tiny things. That doesn't apply to me, to my life, to the solid table I'm sitting at. But here's what nobody tells you. Heisenberg himself addressed this. He said this wave-particle duality doesn't just apply to electrons or light. It applies to molecules, to stones, to everything. Let me read you his exact words. The conception of objective reality has thus evaporated into the mathematics that represents no longer the behavior of elementary particles, but rather our knowledge of this behavior. Our knowledge, not the particles themselves, our knowledge of them. The quantum world isn't a world of things. It's a world of relationships, between the observer and the observed, between consciousness and matter, between you and what you call reality. And this is where physicists start to get uncomfortable. Because if you follow this logic all the way through, and we will, you arrive at a conclusion that changes everything. But before we go there, let me show you exactly what this looks like in practice. Now, I know what's happening in your mind right now. Part of you is excited, another part is skeptical, and another part is thinking, this sounds too much like magic. Trust me on this. I had the same reaction. Because we've been trained to think of reality as solid, fixed, objective. Something out there that exists whether we look at it or not. But here's the thing. The Copenhagen Interpretation isn't some fringe theory. It's the standard interpretation taught in quantum mechanics courses worldwide. Niels Bohr, the man who formulated it, worked alongside Albert Einstein. Max Born, who developed the probability interpretation of the wave function, won the Nobel Prize in 1954 specifically for this work. These weren't mystics. They were rigorous scientists who were deeply uncomfortable with what their experiments were showing them. Einstein himself fought against this interpretation for decades. He famously said, "God does not play dice with the universe." He wanted a reality that existed independently of observation. He wanted the moon to be there even when nobody was looking at it. But the experiments kept proving him wrong. The double-slit experiment, the delayed choice experiment, Bell's theorem, every single one confirmed what the Copenhagen camp was saying. Observation plays a fundamental role in determining reality. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Heisenberg once said in a private conversation, "The idea of an objective real world whose smallest parts exist objectively in the same sense as stones or trees exist independently of whether or not we observe them is impossible." Impossible, not unlikely, not improbable, impossible. Think about the weight of that statement. One of the greatest physicists in history is telling you that the common sense view of reality, the view you've held your entire life, is fundamentally wrong. But this isn't about making you wrong, it's about liberating you. Because if reality isn't fixed and objective, if observation actually participates in creating what's observed, then you're not a passive victim of a predetermined world. You're something far more powerful, and we're going to explore exactly what that means. Let me show you the thought experiment that makes this crystal clear. It's called the two-box experiment, and it's going to break your brain in the best possible way. Because once you understand this, you'll never see yourself the same way again. Shall we move into it? Imagine I place an atom in a box, then I split that box into two separate boxes and move them far apart. One box goes to New York, one box goes to Tokyo. Now, common sense tells you the atom is in one box or the other. You just don't know which one yet, like a shell game. The pea is under one shell, you just haven't looked yet. But quantum mechanics says, no, the atom is in both boxes simultaneously. Until you open one of them. This isn't a metaphor, this is what the mathematics describes. The atom exists in a superposition state, a wave function that encompasses both boxes at once. It doesn't have a location, it has a probability distribution. And here's the radical part. When you open the box in New York and find the atom there, you don't just discover where it was, you cause it to be there. Your act of observation collapses the wave function and forces the atom to choose a location. Before you looked, it was genuinely in both places. After you looked, it's in one place. Now you might think, can't we set up some clever experiment to catch the atom being in both places at once? To prove superposition? And the answer is yes, we can. It's called an interference experiment. When we don't measure which box the atom is in, we get interference patterns that prove mathematically the atom went through both paths. But, and here's the beautiful paradox, the moment we try to measure which box it's in, the interference pattern disappears. We can prove it's in both boxes, or we can prove it's in one box, but we can't prove both simultaneously because observation itself changes the nature of reality. This is the measurement problem, and it's been haunting physicists for almost a century. So here's the question that keeps physicists up at night. What counts as observation? Does it require a conscious observer, a human being? Or does any measurement device count, even an automated one with no consciousness? The Copenhagen Interpretation doesn't give a clear answer. And this ambiguity, this is where reality starts to get slippery. Niels Bohr took a pragmatic approach. He said physics isn't about discovering what nature is. It's only about what we can say about nature. The quantum world, according to Bohr, doesn't exist independently. There is no quantum world. There is only an abstract quantum description. Think about what that means. The most fundamental level of reality, the quantum realm, doesn't have independent existence. It exists only in relation to observation and measurement. John Wheeler, one of the most influential physicists of the 20th century, put it even more starkly: no elementary phenomenon is a phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon. Not registered, not recorded, observed. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. If no phenomenon is real until it's observed, and if observation requires some form of measurement or interaction, then where does the chain end? You observe an atom, but you're made of atoms. So who observes you? Another observer. But they're also made of atoms. So who observes them? John von Neumann, a mathematician and physicist, traced this chain to its logical conclusion. He said if quantum mechanics applies to everything, and there's no reason to think it doesn't, then the chain of observation ultimately terminates in consciousness itself. Consciousness stands outside the chain. It's the final observer that collapses all the wave functions. Now, this is controversial. Many physicists hate this conclusion. They've spent decades trying to find alternatives: the many worlds interpretation, decoherence theory, objective collapse models. But none of them fully solve the measurement problem without introducing something equally strange. Either you accept that consciousness plays a role, or you accept that reality constantly splits into infinite parallel universes, or you accept some mysterious physical process that spontaneously collapses wave functions. Pick your poison. All the options are weird. Einstein rejected all of it. He wanted to believe in an objective reality, a reality where the moon is there even when nobody's looking, where particles have definite positions and velocities even when unobserved. He wanted to know God's thoughts, the deep truth of how reality actually is. But quantum mechanics kept proving him wrong. The experiments were clear. Reality doesn't work the way our intuition says it should, and this brings us to the most profound question of all. If observation creates reality, what does that mean for you, for your life, for your past, for your future? Let's go there. Here's what nobody talks about openly in physics departments, but what many physicists privately acknowledge. If von Neumann is right, if the chain of observation ultimately requires consciousness, then consciousness isn't just an observer of reality, it's a participant in creating it. Let that land for a moment. You are not witnessing a pre-existing reality. You are collapsing wave functions with every observation, every moment of attention, every act of focus. Werner Heisenberg said it directly. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. The questions you ask, the way you direct your attention, these aren't passive acts, they're creative acts. Now here's where most people panic. They think, wait, if I'm creating reality through observation, does that mean everything bad in my life is my fault? Did I create my trauma, my pain, my suffering? And this is where we have to be very careful, very compassionate. Because this interpretation isn't about blame. It's about understanding how the system works. You didn't consciously choose your trauma. You didn't sit down and decide to create suffering. But here's what quantum mechanics suggests. Reality is far more participatory than we've been taught to believe. The Copenhagen Interpretation doesn't say you control everything. It says observation influences what emerges from the field of possibilities. It says consciousness plays a role, not the only role, but a role in how reality manifests. And this is why physicists avoid talking about it, because the moment you say consciousness matters, you're crossing a line. You're moving from pure physics into philosophy, into questions about free will, about the nature of self, about what it means to be human. Questions that science alone can't answer, but questions that might hold the key to transformation. Stay with me, because this is where it all comes together. Now I can hear the objections already. Maybe you're thinking them right now. This is cherry-picking physics to support New Age beliefs. Quantum mechanics only applies to tiny particles, not to human consciousness or daily life. Scientists don't actually think consciousness creates reality. That's a misinterpretation. Let me address these head-on, because these are legitimate concerns, and I want you to think critically about this. Don't just believe me. Question everything I'm saying. First objection, cherry-picking. Here's the thing. I'm not making this up. The quotes I'm sharing are from the founders of quantum mechanics themselves. Heisenberg explicitly said the wave-particle duality applies to molecules, to stones, to everything, not just electrons. The question isn't whether quantum mechanics applies to larger objects. It does. The question is why we don't see quantum effects at the macroscopic level. And the answer is decoherence. The environment acts as a constant observer, collapsing wave functions before we can notice superposition. But that doesn't mean you're not fundamentally quantum. It means you're constantly interacting with an environment that's observing you. Second objection, misinterpretation. Fair. Many physicists are careful to say consciousness isn't required for observation. A photon hitting a detector counts as measurement. No human needed. But here's where it gets interesting. What counts as a measurement? When does the wave function actually collapse? If a detector measures something but nobody reads the detector, did a measurement happen? This is called the Wigner's friend paradox. And it shows that even without invoking consciousness directly, there's a deep mystery about when observation actually occurs. Von Neumann's argument wasn't fringe speculation. It was a rigorous mathematical analysis of where the quantum classical boundary sits. And his conclusion, however uncomfortable, was that consciousness is the most logical place to draw that line. Third objection, this doesn't apply to daily life. And you know what? Most physicists would agree with you. They'd say quantum effects average out at human scales, that for all practical purposes, classical physics works fine. And they're right. For building bridges and launching rockets, you don't need quantum mechanics. But here's what I'm suggesting. Maybe, just maybe, there are areas of human experience where the participatory nature of reality still shows through, where observation still matters, where consciousness still influences outcomes. Not in obvious, magical ways, but in subtle, profound ways. Ways that meditation traditions have known for thousands of years. Ways that modern neuroscience is beginning to confirm. Ways that people like Joe Dispenza are teaching with remarkable results. And this brings us full circle, back to you, back to why this matters. Let me connect the dots for you. Joe Dispenza didn't invent something new. He applied something ancient, meditation, visualization, focused attention, but he framed it in the language of quantum physics. And whether you agree with his specific interpretations or not, here's what's undeniable. When people shift their habitual patterns of observation, when they change what they focus on, what they expect, how they relate to their own thoughts, their lived experience changes. Not because they're magically manifesting reality from nothing, but because observation, attention, and consciousness play a role in how possibilities collapse into actualities. The Copenhagen Interpretation doesn't tell you what to do with this information. It's not a how-to manual. It's a description of how reality seems to work at the most fundamental level. But once you know that observation matters, that consciousness participates in the creation of experienced reality, you start to ask different questions. Not, what should I do, but how am I observing right now? Not how do I fix my life, but what am I collapsing into existence through my habitual attention? Not why is reality doing this to me, but how am I participating in this reality? These aren't victim-blaming questions. They're empowerment questions. Because if reality is participatory, then you're not trapped. You're not fixed. You're not determined by your past. Every moment is a new observation, a new collapse of the wave function, a fresh start. The atoms that make up your body? They're not the same atoms from 7 years ago. They've been completely replaced, and according to quantum mechanics, those atoms aren't solid things anyway. They're processes, tendencies, waves of probability. You are not a fixed thing, you are a dynamic process of observation and collapse, of attention and creation. And that changes everything. Here's what this means for your trauma, for your past, for the story you've been telling yourself about who you are. If atoms aren't fixed, if they exist as possibilities until observed, then you're not fixed either. The trauma you experienced, real, valid, not to be dismissed. But here's the quantum truth. It's not stored in your atoms like data on a hard drive, because your atoms aren't even things. They're patterns, processes, and patterns can change. Your past happened, but the meaning you give it, the way you observe it, relate to it, identify with it, that's not fixed. That's quantum. Every time you remember something, you're not pulling up a file. You're collapsing a wave function. You're creating a present moment observation of a past event. And in that observation, there's room for change, for reinterpretation, for healing. This isn't about denying what happened. It's about understanding that you are not your past. You are the observer of your past, and observation, according to physics, has creative power. Now, does this mean you can just think positive thoughts and your life will magically transform? No, that's not what the Copenhagen Interpretation says. It's not that simple, but it does mean this. The way you habitually observe yourself, your circumstances, your possibilities, this matters at a fundamental level. Most people observe from the same state of consciousness every day. They wake up and immediately they remember who they think they are. They observe themselves through the filter of past identity. And in doing so, they collapse the same patterns over and over again. Same thoughts, same emotions, same behaviors, same reality. It's not that the universe is punishing you. It's that you're stuck in a loop of habitual observation. And habitual observation creates habitual reality. Breaking that loop, that's the work. That's what meditation does. That's what breath work does. That's what any genuine transformative practice does. It interrupts the pattern of observation. It creates space between stimulus and response, between past and present, between who you were and who you're becoming. And in that space, that quantum space of superposition, new possibilities exist. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to take this as metaphysical truth. But consider it as a framework, as a way of understanding why certain practices work, why meditation changes brain structure, why visualization affects performance, why directed attention influences outcomes. Not because it's magic, but because observation is participatory, because consciousness isn't separate from matter, because you're not separate from reality. You're part of the wave function, and you're part of the collapse, both simultaneously. Let me tell you what this really means, what it means at the deepest level. You have been taught that you are a thing, a solid separate object in a world of other solid separate objects, a victim of circumstances, a product of your past, limited by your biology, your upbringing, your trauma. But quantum mechanics, the most successful scientific theory in human history, says that's not true. At the most fundamental level of reality, you are not a thing. You are a process of observation. You are consciousness collapsing wave functions. You are attention creating actuality from possibility. And this isn't mysticism. This is physics. The Copenhagen Interpretation doesn't promise you magical powers. It doesn't say you can manifest $1 million by thinking happy thoughts. That's not how this works. But what it does say, what Bohr and Heisenberg and von Neumann reluctantly concluded, is that consciousness plays a fundamental role in the nature of reality itself. You are not outside reality looking in. You are part of reality, an active, participatory part. And that means you have agency, real agency. Not you can do anything if you try hard enough agency, but you participate in creating what emerges from the field of infinite possibilities agency. Every moment of your life you are observing, and in observing you are choosing consciously or unconsciously which possibilities collapse into your experienced reality. The question isn't whether you have this power. You do. You're exercising it right now, in this moment, whether you realize it or not. The question is, are you doing it consciously or unconsciously? Are you observing from a state of past conditioning and trauma, or from a state of present awareness and intention? Are you collapsing the same old patterns, Or are you willing to hold the space of superposition long enough for something new to emerge? This is the power the Copenhagen Interpretation reveals. Not control, not omnipotence, but participation, co-creation, partnership with the quantum field of infinite possibilities. And here's the most beautiful part. You don't have to fix yourself first. You don't have to heal all your trauma before you can access this power. Because observation happens now, not in the future when you're finally ready. Now. This moment is already a fresh collapse of the wave function. Already a new beginning. Already a doorway into possibility. The atoms that make up your body, they're not solid, they're not fixed. They're waves of probability, tendencies, potentials. You are not a static self, you are a dynamic process, and every observation is an opportunity to participate differently, to observe from a new state, to expect a different outcome, to collapse a new reality into existence, not because you're manifesting magic, but because you're finally aligning with how reality actually works. So what do you do with this information? How do you actually use it? First, understand that this isn't about controlling reality. It's about participating consciously in reality's unfolding. Start with observation itself. Begin to notice how you observe. What do you habitually look for? What do you expect to see? What patterns do you reinforce through repeated attention? Most people spend their entire lives observing from the same state of consciousness. Same fears, same beliefs, same identity. And they wonder why nothing changes. But if you can create even a small gap, a moment of presence, of awareness, of conscious observation, you create the conditions for new possibilities to emerge. This is why meditation works, not because it's mystical, but because it trains you to observe without immediately collapsing the wave function through habitual reaction. It creates space, and in that space, superposition exists. Multiple possibilities, new potentials. Second, be gentle with yourself. You've been unconsciously creating reality through observation your entire life. You didn't know. Your parents didn't know. Your culture didn't know. But now you do. And that knowing, that awareness is itself a new observation, a new collapse, a new beginning. You don't have to get it perfect. You don't have to never fall back into old patterns. The beauty of quantum mechanics is that every moment is a new measurement, a fresh start. Third, trust the process. Transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens through repeated observations from a new state of consciousness, through consistently choosing to observe differently. One conscious observation, then another, and slowly, gradually, your experienced reality begins to shift, not because you're forcing it, but because you're finally working with the fundamental nature of how reality creates itself. Through observation, through consciousness, through you. Ready for what comes next? If you're still with me, if something in this resonated, I want to invite you into something. This isn't just information. This is a conversation, a movement, a community of people who are waking up to the participatory nature of reality. People who understand that consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter. It's a fundamental aspect of how reality works. And here's the thing. You need other observers, not to validate your experience, but to strengthen the coherence of the new pattern you're creating. When you're the only one observing from a new state, the old patterns have momentum. But when you're part of a field of people observing differently, the collapse happens faster, stronger, more stably. So here's what I'm asking. If this video shifted something in you, hit that subscribe button. Not for me, for you. Because every time you come back here, you're reinforcing a new pattern of observation, a new state of consciousness. And drop a comment, one word. The energy you're feeling right now. Curious, blown, skeptical, empowered, whatever it is. Because when you put that word into the field, you're making an observation. You're collapsing your experience into language. And that act, that creative act, matters. This is episode 17 in the Observer Effect series. We've been building towards something. And what comes next? Episode 18 is where things get controversial. Because I'm going to show you the debate that refuses to die. The conversation between physicists who believe reality is real and those who say, shut up and calculate. And trust me, what gets revealed in that dialogue will make today's content look tame. The full playlist and the next video link are in the description below. Don't miss it. Until then, here's your practice. Observe. Just observe. Notice what you habitually look for, what you expect, what you assume, and in noticing, create space. Create possibility, create a new collapse. Because you're not a victim of reality. You're a participant in its creation, and that changes everything. I'll see you in the next one.